I am so excited to have this conversation with you, Emma, and I have absolutely no idea where it's going to go. I know the things that we want to talk about. I'm going to have a go at keeping us on track. But I think it's the first time consciously that I've had a conversation with another ADHD, and that could mean that we both get very excited and talk about absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. I think we both can talk at length. Yes. I think we both can talk at length about many subjects. So yeah, should be interesting. I'm excited.
I will attempt to curtail us. I'm going to start with, new season of a blended podcast. And so my first question is, what about adulting or being an adult are you in awe of?
I think the biggest piece for me that I'm in awe of being an adult is that we are just set out into the wilds. You know, we are given some tools as we grow up, but then we're just released, and it's like we're supposed to know all of the things, and we're supposed to have all the skills, and especially as a autistic ADHDer, when you're watching at our age everybody else kind of continue that journey, and we're sitting here spinning our wheels going like, what's going on? And then realizing that, you know, midway through life, that what I thought was my operating system is not my operating system, and that I have to learn a whole new thing, and that nobody is going to come help me, that I have to do all of this on my own, with my own strength, my own persistence, to hunt out the things I need to heal myself, so I can move forward with the rest of my generation.
I find that really interesting because, well, and I'm like, how do I put this tactfully? I don't know.
Oh, no.
See what comes out.
What you're going to say. Fuck it. We don't need to fit in. I don't need to move along with my generation. I know all of it.
It's not that, right? It's more like, so for me, and I know that we were just talking about off air that we got our diagnoses about the same time. Yeah. And for me, that was at 42 years of age, and it genuinely was a massive surprise. Yeah. In so many ways, right? Like, and I'd been working with Misfits for 10 years. My whole brand is Misfit to Maven. And now when I go back and read my book, it's like there's kind of neon flashing lights throughout it. Like, somebody could have told me, right? Yeah. Except who? And so when I hear you talking, I'm like, well, who? Like, who should have taught us around? And isn't the way that the whole of society is set up just a whole load of make-believe anyway? And surely at this point, like for me, the piece I'm in awe of is that I can finally let go of thinking that there is a rule book and that I'm supposed to live a certain way, and I can just get on with being me in the world and let go of there are things to figure out. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but I am that kind of autist that needs the answers to every single question. And it's why I think I really struggle in the industries that I have worked in, because I want to know why. And not just why. I need to know, like, how can I break this down to the simplest form so I can work with it, so then I can help others work with this thing. And that's how my brain works. I take these really large concepts and boil them down to these simple things. Like, I ran on the whole idea of ritual without rules for so long, and I still believe in all of that, because we need to simplify these things, bring it back to basics, allow people to do that journey. But I feel like as humans and humanity, we've overcomplicated absolutely everything.
Yes.
And that's what I'm questioning. Like, why, you know what I mean? Like, I'm looking at where I sit in this world. And if I was just allowed to go forth and be Emma, You know, I haven't lived a normal life. I mean, I have lived a very autistic life. I've never really had a traditional job. I was a photographer for 25 years. Then I was a college professor, and then I stepped deep into my mediumship, and then I, you know, became a metaphysical shop owner and a spiritual teacher. So I've created this life that totally suits my style. And, you know, I even built a house that works perfectly for what I need. But there's just so many more pieces that I want to make that connection so that happens easier without the stress and the overwhelm and the anxiety. Because if I can understand my operating system instead of knowing somebody else's my entire life, I feel like then it would just be complete flow, as opposed to flow for a little bit, then complete pause.
I 100% agree. And, you know, so much like if I had to name my hyper focus or my specialist skill, my area of study for the last 35 years, it is the psycho-spiritual development of humans, right? It just is. Like, how do you operate, and how does that fit into the grander scheme of our what we are here for as souls having a human experience? And why is it so difficult to be a human being in this body? I think I was put in wrong, and things don't fit like they do for other people. And when I look at it from a like slightly further away position, what I see is it's a little bit like, my brain can get into a whole thing about this. Why has sexism and or like all of the isms existed for so long in a society where we actually make up more than half of the people, right? And that's the piece where I'm like, you know what? All of the suddenly getting labeled weirdos or misfits who have different operating systems, maybe there isn't less of us. Like, I don't think there is at all. I think our whole generation...
I think it once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you see it in everybody. Like,
and specifically, like the Zennials, right? Like from 1978 to 1983, there's a little group of us who are now the adults, right? And like I always quote clerks on this, like I wasn't even supposed to be here today, except that now we're the grown-ups, right? And like now we are running things. So if we are the majority and we are running things and we're the adults, like it's time to flip the switch on, oh my God, I need to figure out life, and why didn't somebody tell me, and all of those things, and realize that we were sent here to figure ourselves out, and then not tell anybody, but model, like show rather than tell. How we get to move into a paradigm of individuation where it's really okay for everyone to have a unique operating system.
Yeah. No, I think it's completely going to change. And I mean, really, if you're in the work that we do, we're truly chasing a matriarchal society. Like when you look at the practices that most people follow, you know, even today on the solstice, like we're watching this wheel turn and things shift into this new way. But look at society right now. Like when I first started doing this work, it was whispers. It was, hey, after mediumship class on a Thursday night, let's hang out at the coffee shop until 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's the only time we can talk about it and engage in that conversation. And it was very hush hush. And then, you know, with Starhawk really pulling from the 70s and everybody in, and then there was another rebound in the 80s, and now we're seeing the 90s and, you know, into 2023, everybody's doing this work. You know, when I started, it was so hard to pull people out of the world that I would say 95% of this planet is living in, this society where, you know, we go to school, we get married, we have 2 kids, we have a dog, we have a house, and then you retire, and then you get a cottage, and we do all these things. But why?
Well, why do we do me, like I grew up with 2 parents who didn't do any of those, right? So like Ebony is my real name. My parents were like really ahead of their time. My mum studied with Osho. My dad is just this incredible kind of person who was really, really autodidactic and into living a life of freedom and wanted that for us, brought us up. Like he told me as a tiny kid, you sat on a star, you looked down from heaven and you picked us as your parents. And, you know, in the 80s, when they took us out of school, or when I had a different name, or when any of these things, when I would talk about astrology, or I would talk about Kundalini, or I would talk about spiritual bypassing, like nobody had a clue what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And it was weird as hell. And now people are like, oh my God, that must have been so cool. I'm like, no, all I wanted was to become family and to go to a state school and to not have these weird parents and to eat E numbers and to like sit in front of a TV and zone out, right? Like I wasn't allowed any of those things.
Yeah, me neither.
So it's really interesting to see, like, we in some ways kind of rewrite history, right? And like, because people are like, well, it must be so easy for you now because you've had all of these years of training and you know all of this stuff. It's like, well, I don't see myself like, yes, I've been doing it since I was 5, but because I was conditioned in my teens and 20s to believe that it must be quiet and not share it with anyone, I've never really owned that part of me. Whereas I see some of my close friends now who are 10 years younger, who don't have that same conditioning around the witch wound or around hiding, because for them, at that age in their 20s, it was cool, right? And they had other people and other kind of peers talking about it.
Yeah. Well, when I had my metaphysical shock, you know, the majority of people coming in were kids anywhere from like 9, 10, 11 to like 18, 19. That was the majority of people that were coming in. And it totally lit my heart up, because the reason why I started doing all of this, and I wrote about this in my book, was, you know, I didn't have anybody to show me the mediumship part. We were pagan, we celebrated, we followed the wheel of the year, and we did all of those things. But my mom didn't know what to do with, I'm talking to my dead uncle, right? And that was really why I wanted to do this work, was because I wanted, at the time I wasn't going to have kids, but that all changed in a magic way. But I wanted my child to be able to have access to all of those things, to not be, what is this voice in my head? Oh my God, I'm going crazy. My mom's scared. Like, you know, all of these things. I mean, my mom, she didn't really tell anybody, but she was wickedly supportive in the way that she could be. Like, I'd be, you know, pushing my sister down the street in a imaginary pram because she passed away before I was born, and my mom would like take over pushing my sister down the street. So like, you know, she really supported me. But what I saw coming through all this was, we're going to need more people to support people like myself, to support our children, to support the next generation. And I knew that community was going to be a huge part of that. So I think I've now had my online community for almost a decade, which is crazy. It just started from the people attending my workshops wanting to continue the conversation afterwards. Because like I said, when we started, you couldn't talk about it like openly, publicly in a coffee shop.
Well, and we talked about this just before we went live, because otherwise you'd end up getting sectioned, right? And you'd have somebody saying this person is crazy. And there's, I can't think of a better person to have this other kind of part of the conversation with that has been intriguing me for a little while. And this is one of those conversations that I've had with many people in hushed tones. And I have done some research, but as somebody who, so 5'2" in human design, I get to a certain point with research and then I'm bored, but you strike me as someone who's potentially done more on this. So there is some information about the shaman gene being where ADHD and where autism cross and meet one another. And I love that you're nodding at me, because this could have gone one of two ways, right? Is this something that you have heard, that you have looked into, that you've explored in any way? Because it feels from my claircognizance very true, but I have nothing to substantiate it.
So this is actually one of the biggest things that I've been struggling with since my diagnosis.
Yeah.
Is what is the autism and what is my own little bit of spiciness? You know, like what is me able to know things about yourself or like about you or any client that comes and sits across from me? And what's just pattern recognition?
Mm-hmm.
And I really am, and nobody wants to have the conversation. I have tried to have this conversation a million times. I know because of the work that I have done, I was put here on this planet to do the work that I'm doing. And every single time I do that, I get a full body rush. I get a, yes, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And it's about educating people to connect back to the lands, to connect back to themselves. It doesn't have to be this greater piece of there has to be religion attached to it. It can just be, you know, when we connect in shamanism, you don't name anything, you don't question anything, it just is. The information you get is the information you receive, and it goes, and that feels very much like autism to me, to be honest.
So much so, right? Like, and I got like goosebumps from that, because it's this piece around being in the isness. And when the comment that I get most frequently about myself and my work, and it's, for a little while I pushed back against it because it didn't feel fair. People always say your signature brutal honesty, right? And they have said that to me for years, right? And I'm
same.
But I was also like, babe, I'm tempering it, right? Like I am.
Oh,
really
I'm not as brutal as what's in my head. Like I can't.
But when I'm like channeling, or when Ebony, the personality, isn't sitting in front of and guarding what comes out of her mouth, yeah, it probably is brutal honesty, right? But it is infused with so much love. And I think that's where autism gets a bad rap, right? Like it's seen as very lacking in heart or lacking in empathy. And I know that
this is the crazy thing, you know. I actually found, what was her name? She's left Hay House. She had a whole bunch of decks. It's a big thing. But I found her book somebody had given me about indigo children when I was cleaning out books the other day. And I just like, what are you talking about, woman? This book is insane. Like, I'm going to burn it. That's one of the things I'm doing today. Is like, it's called Feeding Your Indigo Child or something. I'm burning it. That is, and there's this whole piece of people want to call autism a superpower, but then they also want to say that we're limiting in so many ways. Like when somebody says to me, like, autists don't understand empathy, and I'm like, I labeled myself as an empath for a decade. Like I can sit across from somebody and immediately feel what they're feeling because I have all the senses, like all of them. We have all the senses. So I do believe it is access, like a very clear, clean access into shamanism, into spirituality, because we're always asking the bigger questions. We're always wanting to know more, and we're always wanting to improve upon ourselves. And I mean, that comes from the trauma piece of all of it, but we still are always trying to move forward. But that intersection with like shamanism and that intersection with spirituality, I think just boosts our abilities. I think there's lots of autists that aren't connected to spirituality whatsoever, and it's not really what they were put here on earth to do. They were all about numbers and algorithms and all that stuff, and that stuff makes absolutely no sense to me.
Neither. And that's why for me it's the intersection then with ADHD as well. And what I see is I see pure I think there are multiple types of pure autist. I think there are multiple types of pure ADHD, but there's this particular blend where big picture and tiny details with a field of fuzz and feeling in between. And the way that I have taken to describing because did this happen to you as someone with both? I spend a lot of time going, oh, that's this one, or oh, that's this one, and trying to separate them and trying to figure out which one's which.
I don't think I do so much, just because I grew up with a somewhat diagnosis.
Okay.
So I knew I had auditory processing issues. I knew I had working memory issues. So I kind of always knew that was there, and that sits in the executive function of ADHD. But then I knew there was this magical part. I just didn't know it was autism. I had literally no clue. I just knew I had trouble remembering stuff, and I didn't always hear what you said to me, or I couldn't do listening and writing at the same time.
Yeah, the way my auditory stuff shows up is that I, as a kid, used to say what and then answer, because
I
thought I didn't heard, but there was a part of me that, like, my body heard, but my ears didn't, or something, and then I'd respond. But for me, like, the piece I was talking about is that I have there's grids ebony and circles ebony, right?
Yeah.
And so the grids is my autism and the circles is my ADHD. And so when I'm gridding, I can get really stuck in loops of grids, right? And like someone go, can't you just do this? I'm like, no, I have to finish this first. What are you talking about? I can't possibly. And then I have circle days, right, where nothing gets finished because everything's a circle, and that's not a loop, it's different. And the only way, like, I'm using grids and circles, but it's a feeling, not something that I would normally be able to put language to. And it's just really nice to have someone say yes while I am explaining that.
Well, it's so hard because especially we're in deep autistic burnout. So, you know, when you asked me to do this, I was like, hell yes. But then I was like, wait a second. I haven't done something interactive like this for so long, because when we reach that like deep burnout, and then, you know, I don't know how many cycles of burnout you went through before you hit the big one like I did, but I think I probably had at least 10 or 15, if I go back and look at my life, of major burnouts. But you just get to that point where it's like, you can't move forward. You can't, like, those time loops that you get stuck in. I had a big day on Monday with my doctor and all sorts of like emotional stuff going on. Yesterday, like, I actually thought I might have to call you and say, my brain's not working. We may have to push this, because yesterday I could barely put a sentence together. I could barely actually, I didn't focus at all. I just bounced around from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, not accomplishing anything. And it's just so frustrating. I think that's the part of having both that is incredibly hard to deal with, because we can be very focused. We can be like, when I do that hyper focus, and I think about when I had the shop for Christmas, I made something like 250 roller balls, 200 candles, all by myself within the span of like 2 weeks. And that's insane when you're running other businesses, when you're doing all of these things. But the result of that is, when I did my launch video, and I think I actually ended up deleting it, I was a zombie. I was an actual zombie. And I even had my son come and help me in the video to get people revved up, because I had nothing left. I'd literally given everything I had, physically, emotionally, financially, to give back to society. Because I don't know how your autistic piece works, but like, the whole justice piece and wanting to fight for people and wanting to help people and wanting to heal people and putting everybody else before myself, that is, I don't want to say that's my most toxic trait, but it's one of the ones that I'm really trying to work on, that I can't be a people pleaser forever.
Yeah, it's really shifted for me. And like hearing you talk, I'm like, that's really interesting because I don't experience burnout like that at all. And I haven't done for years. And that's because I had two big ones. I had one where so one in 2009 I wrote about in the book, and I ended up homeless and starting a business from a huge amount of debt. It was what was the end of the TV industry, and that worked for me. And then I started a company called My Girl Friday, and I went all in on that. And within 3 years, I had 17 freelancers working for me. We were making headlines, winning awards. Everything looked great, and I wasn't paying myself, and people only wanted me. And then I had a kind of breakdown, moved to Bali, and that was in 2012. And then in 2012, I spent some time assimilating and synthesizing in true manifesting generator style everything that I had learned from every entrepreneur I'd ever worked with, every spiritual person I'd ever met, all the stuff I'd done with my dad, the years as his assistant, like all of the stuff, because by that point, I was 32 or 31 and a bit, end of my Saturn return. So the first one was the beginning of my Saturn return. The second one was at the end of my Saturn return. And by that point, I'd been in spirituality and I'd been in personal development and working with psychotherapists. And because my dad was one, and I worked as an assistant to many for like 10 years alongside my TV career. And so I had all of this information, which I synthesized and created the Misfit to Maven way and the 8 pillars of practice that have become the fundamentals and that I still share and teach today. And it is those that I credit with building, that they became the solid foundation on which I built my life. And I haven't had in 9 years since then. So then I built the next business, which was Misfit to Maven and everything around that, and published my book in 2014. And so in the last 9 years, I haven't had any major burnout or breakdown. And that is because I have really clear rules. So I don't see anyone on a Sunday. If I have to change my plans to choose to see someone on a Sunday, then I take Saturday off. Like there are movable blocks. There's a certain time in my cycle, so day 23 to 25, where I don't see people, or I don't have clients, where I don't pretend I can teach anyone anything about anything.
I was doing the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, because like that week before and the week of, there's no way.
I can now, and that's because I've really shifted who my clients are, right? And they are other people like yourself, like I know that you know Desiree, who was doing some work with me, other people, right? And who really get it and who actually really enjoy having it modeled when I'm not in look at me, I'm a swan. Actually, it's really helpful for them sometimes to see kicking duck as well. And so I try much more to show up in those different places and work from them as well. And moving to a place where where the work ethic doesn't exist. I'm in Spain for most of the time at the moment, where the beach is there, where I've really shifted my day, that I get up early and I don't get to my desk till 11. And that whole morning is spent taking care of myself and getting into my value filter, has meant I really don't experience those burnout pieces in the same way. I am really aware that I'm about to go to the UK for a month and stay with 6 different people and in 6 different beds, and like tons of traveling. And this, normally I hire a car and then I'm in charge of where I am when, and that's cool. This time, no car. So speak to me again in a month and I will tell you about experience.
I was gonna say, I'm like, really? Are you sure? Because like I attend this like peer support group once a week, which has been super helpful. It's the only time I've ever hung out with any other autist. So it's kind of like, this is fantastic. But it like opens your eyes to so many different things and how we experience. And I said, in there were so many people dealing with burnout. And I said, look, I work in an area where like meditation is daily, calming yourself and your nervous system is a daily practice. I have all the tools. I give myself Reiki, I drum, I do it all. But when our nervous systems are traumatized for decades, you know, there's gonna be that point where the crack opens. And I've learned that this is called buildup. So what you're going to experience in the next month going to England is buildup. You know, so it's like finding places in between to break that buildup, to break that tension, really helps. And that's what I'm finding. Like you were saying, you know, we have these days where we can go, 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 go. And then the next day it's like, I got to take it off. Like you really have to manage your energy. And, you know, I went through a period of creating all these businesses very similar to you, and shifting my life, and then going, oh my God, I guess we're going to put a kid in here. And then becoming a parent, not knowing that I have autism, and having birth trauma. That's a whole other story. You know, there's so many things that are going to take us to that place of pure emotion. And what I try to tell everybody is that's where you want to be. Like, you need to get to that place, so then you can just surrender and say, where do I go from here? Because, you know, what I was doing for so long was using all of these tools to keep myself in a decent place. Like, I was good. Like, I didn't know, like, that finding out my diagnosis of autism was going to send me for a complete and utter, like, holy crap, this is life-changing. I didn't know that was going to happen. But like, I had to get to that place. You know, I teach shadow work, and I assist people in shadow work, and people avoid going to that deep, dark place so much. I was one of them. I was one that was saying, yeah, I got my daily ritual, man. Yeah, I got this, I got that, I got all of these things. But it was like, that was just keeping me sane enough to not go all the way down here. Right. And what's down here changes everything. Like, changes everything for me. Like,
yeah, I really hear you in that, and I can see that you are processing that, and I feel that.
yeah.
I think for me, like, I did all of that at between 29 and 30,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And, like, really went. And then what I found is that the people I attract are totally willing to go there, and have been going there and have met themselves. And
well,
then,
you're lucky, because my work is trying to convince people to go there. Like, that's what I've been put
but
there.
I think it's because they're a mirror of me, and I was totally going there. But what they don't do, and what my work, and I love, by the way, that you have taken a break to heal yourself. Like, my version of healing myself when the last business broke was because I was not allowing myself to be in majesty and shine and have it all, right? Like, I was expecting, oh, look, there must be some more dark shit to look at. Turns out, no. Turns out, actually, I get to flourish and be happy and have spaciousness, and things get to work. And there has been a level of really processing that, and like allowing, like, that. I think there's a level of shadow work in the light, right? And like in letting things
definitely
be good. And that's definitely been my last iteration of that.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things that I do really want to acknowledge, because my life hasn't always been privileged, because actually that's one of the things that, very much like you, like, I was out of the home when I was 17, and I made every dollar from that day forward, put myself through college, like all of those things. But being able, you know, that was actually kind of what made me leave social media. I left social media for 14 months to do all of this healing work. Was that I realized, like, who am I to sit here and tell the world, you need to heal, you need to do shadow work, you need to move forward, when I remember what it was like in my shitty little apartment in Toronto, with only enough food for one meal a day, and my cigarettes were the other two meals, right? Like, that was, so I think really want to acknowledge that in our industry specifically, we're telling people to do this work, but then not also saying, when you do this deep work, when you do this shadow work, your life may come undone a little bit. And that you need to make space and a container to do that. And for some people, that may mean just bite-sized chunks of shadow work once a year when you have the time to really delve in deep.
For sure.
Right?
Because that's not how I work, right? And the level of, and I'm aware of time, and I want us to wrap up, but I am really aware that the way that has worked for me is that there have been periods of more traditional success with money coming in and notoriety, and then there's also been huge drop backs to living on in a very, very frugal way and choosing to move cities, countries in order to be able to maintain a level of lifestyle at the income that I've got coming in. And for me, the spiritual, emotional, physical journey that I have chosen to be on as an incarnation in human form, I am so all in on it that I will just follow it wherever it takes.
Oh, for sure. But we have to acknowledge that we're privileged to do that. Like
it's massively inconvenient, right? And then I acknowledge the level of privilege that I have in terms of skin color, the side of the world I'm living on, like education, all of those things. And I also acknowledge for myself my willingness to go into the places where it's inconvenient and to massively inconvenience my life in order to learn. And not everybody is willing to do that.
Yeah, no. And that's what, what I'm trying to say is it's really now our I think COVID was forcing the world into shadow work. Honestly, that's what it felt like to me, was people had time to actually look at what was working for them, to look at what wasn't working for them. And a lot of people went, that is not working for me, and dropped everything, and I do think that there are more and more people coming online to do this, but we do have to do it in somewhat of a accessible way. And I think that's the piece that is really hard, because shadow work is sacred. This is something that is deep and can take you to places that you don't think you were ever gonna go. I didn't think the things that are actually in here were the things that were bugging me. Like, I thought it was like this shit way over here, but it's actually not that at all.
100%. I totally get that. And this is a beautiful point for us to wrap this up and continue the conversation in the Patreon part of the podcast, where we will talk about some friends that we have that are allies on this journey. So if you are interested in hearing us talk about mushrooms and psilocybin and plant medicine and sacred shadow work, then come and listen to us in the Patreon part of the podcast. Emma, if people want to come and carry on the conversation with you personally, or like see what you're up to, find you online, whatever, where's the best place for them to come?
Go to emmasmallbone.com. It will pop up as the Sacred Grove. It's my community. It is free. There's a couple of courses in there that are paid access, but they're all affordable, all accessible. The whole idea for me is making whatever movement we're moving forward accessible, and something where we can support each other and help each other thrive and just be good humans. So emmasmallbone.com for everything, and at Emma Smallbone on Instagram.
Cool. I'm going to put the links in so that they're easily clickable. Thank you so much for coming and having a wonderful chat with me, and for the next part as well.